Hello everyone, it's Channin for Waffle Flower Crafts. Today I'm going to be using this die set. It's called Pretty Butterflies. I'm using that largest butterfly there. I'll also be using this stamp set. It's called Congrats. I'll be using it for a sentiment. I'm using the It's Your Day. I've already got it pulled off my acetate and mounted on my acrylic block already. First I'm going to start off by making a DIY stamp. I'm using some craft foam here and that large butterfly from the Pretty Butterflies die set. I'm going to just use my Cuttlebug here to cut from the craft foam that large butterfly. So I've got the blade side down into the craft foam. I'm just going to run it through here. Once I pull it out, you'll see that it has all the little negative pieces. It's still inside there, so I will have to pop those out with like a pin tool. And it didn't smush. You definitely want to make sure when you, because I'm going to be using this to stamp with, and I don't want the foam all smushed, so make sure your settings on your die cutting machine will not smush your craft foam too much, because you still want it to have that give and that little spring to it. You don't want it all smushed. Okay, so now that I've got it all popped out, I'm going to use some permanent tape adhesive, and I'm going to use this to mount this butterfly onto the acrylic block. You could try repositional adhesive. I don't have any, so I'm not sure if it will work, but I can tell you for certain that the permanent adhesive will hold that your craft foam down perfectly, and it comes off very cleanly off of your block too when you're all done, so no worries there. And this is a Tombow permanent adhesive. It's not like extra strength or anything, it's just regular permanent adhesive. Okay, so now that I've got my stamp all made, I'm ready to move on to the inks. I'm using 6 Distress Oxide inks today: Fossilized Amber, Broken China, Cracked Pistachio, Spiced Marmalade, Worn Lipstick, and Wilted Violet. I'll be stamping on I'm going to make 2 cards. So I've got a A2 white cardstock panel and a craft cardstock panel. And I also will be incorporating water. This cardstock is 110 pounds, so you definitely want some thicker cardstock for this, because I am incorporating water, and water will warp thinner weight cardstocks. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to ink up this butterfly, and I'm going to ink this up with all 6 colors so it has like a rainbow. So I am very careful about applying a pressure on the very edge of the stamp pad onto to the next section of the butterfly. So basically I'm using 3 colors on one half of the butterfly, and I'll use the other 3 colors on the other half. And it's okay if it overlaps a little, but I'm trying not to overlap my inks too much, but I am going from light to darker, so I'm not too concerned about contaminating my ink pads. And then I'll move on to my last color here and just ink up the edge with this Wilted Violet. And once I have this all inked up, I'm going to mist it with my spray bottle. Just going to do a little bit of cleanup here, and now I will mist it with my water. So you can see that nice rainbow that I got from all those 6 colors. And I'll do a fine mist over here, just a little bit here, just to get the ink kind of moving and the colors starting to mix a little bit, so it's a better transition from one color to the next. And I'm going to start by stamping on the craft foam, or I'm sorry, the craft cardstock. So I'm going to stamp directly onto that craft cardstock. And then I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to stamp on the white cardstock. I'm just going to stamp right down. So doing a second stamp. Because this craft foam is a little bit more porous, I should say, than your clear stamps, the ink kind of stretches and goes a lot further. So I'm going to get 2 stamps, at least 2 stamps per each ink up that I do. And this is the very first time, as you use this stamp and do more, inking it up more and more, you can even stretch it even more because it starts to get wet, and that helps to also stretch. You know, after I clean it off here, it's a little wet from misting and cleaning, and when I ink it up again, which I'm going to do right now, that residual water that's still in the stamp kind of continues to stretch that ink a little bit more. So I think I only end up inking this up like 3 times to create both cards, but we'll see here to make sure. So I'm again inking up it exactly the way that I did before, putting that pressure on the edge of the stamp pad, and then just lightly tapping it, slightly overlapping the color that was previous. And I'll do a little cleanup here because once I spray this, any residual ink on the sides could drip off and get onto your cardstock. So I'm just going to mist it again just like I did before. And then I'm going to start with the craft foam again. So I'm always starting with the craft foam because it is a darker cardstock, and the first stamp that I do is always going to be the most, so the first stamp that I do after I re-inked it is always the most intense color. So I'm always going to start on the craft foam and do that first stamp there. And here I'm going into stamp 3, third time stamping with this. And I'll sometimes spritz it again one more time before I stamp it like a third or fourth time. And I'll do one more. I just spritzed it there, so I'm doing one more stamp. So this is a 4th time with this one, the second inking. Okay, so I got, and again, like I was saying before, so the reason why I start with the craft foam or the craft paper is because it's a darker cardstock, and I want that first time that I ink up, or right after I ink up the stamp, it's got the most ink and it'll be the darkest and most visible. So that's why I stamp it on the cardstock for the craft paper first, and then I'll do the 2nd generation, 3rd generation, 4th generation stamping on the white cardstock, where because it's such a light cardstock, I can get away with lighter shades of ink because you'll still see them. So I'm inking this up for the 3rd time here. And I will, once I'm done with this purple, I'll spritz it again with the water. And again, when you spritz it, that just kind of mixes the water, or I'm sorry, mixes the ink and the water together and kind of helps to blend the transition between the colors. So a very fine, just a very light mist here. It's not dripping or anything, just little tiny little drips, dots of water on the surface. And I think I'm going to go directly stamp it another time here because it's building up that ink a little bit more now because I've done 3 layers. So I'm going to mist it again first. That kind of extends it a little bit further, get that ink a little further. And I got 2 butterflies out of that, and I think I'll do like a final one here on the, just cleaning up. I got a little bit of too much water. And I'm just going to do a little bit extra here on this white one. So now I'm on I did 3 stamps with this. So 3rd generation. Now I'm going to move on to 4th generation stamping. So you can really see how you get a lot of images just from inking up this craft foam, because it really extends your ink a lot further than the clear stamps typically do. And I think it works really well for these Distress Oxides because they're just a bit thicker than regular dye inks, and they can really stretch when you use this craft foam. You can really stretch that ink. Okay, so I lied. So I inked it up 4 times here, and this will be the last time, I know for sure. And I think I'll do just a couple more stamping on the craft cardstock, but the white is all done. So once I finish this purple here, again, I'll mist it with my water. I do a little cleanup. So do a fine mist, and then I'm just going to stamp this a couple more times on that craft cardstock. Just doing a little cleanup again because I got a little too much water. You want to be careful not to have too much water on that block, just because you could get drops of water. I'm trying to avoid lots and lots of water on this project, but you do need a little bit with these Distress Oxides, just because, well, one, it stretches them so you can stamp multiple times, but two, Distress Oxides, they change when you use water with them. They kind of become more vivid, especially on darker cardstocks. And that one's done. So now they're done. I have one more thing that I need to do. I'm just cleaning up here real quick, but I have one more thing that I need to do on the craft. Oh, looks like I'm going to stamp one more time on the white, but I still have one more thing I need to do after I finish this white panel to the craft cardstock panel. I am going to spritz the whole thing with water to kind of activate that ink and make those colors pop. So that's something that's really, really cool. Of course, I learned this from Jennifer McGuire, but if you spritz your stamped Distressed Oxides, especially you can really see this on darker cardstock, you spritz them after you stamp them, all those colors kind of, it's almost like the white pigment that's in the ink comes to the surface. It just makes those colors more vivid. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm taking the spritzer and I'm doing exactly what I said. I'm just going to spritz that craft cardstock just a little bit here, and that's going to activate that ink and really intensify those colors, really make them pop. Now, of course, I don't know exactly how it works with this Distressed Oxides, but I know it's to be true, and you'll see it. I think you can see it here on camera. It is a little hard to see, but you would definitely see it if you do it in person. But especially that worn lipstick, I don't know about that one for why, but once I spritz that with a little bit of water, it really kind of starts to make that shade pop. So now I'm going to let these dry. They're both a little bit wet, and now I'm going to start to work on my embellishment. So I went ahead and took that large butterfly from the Pretty Butterflies die set again, same one that I used to cut the craft foam, and I cut a white butterfly out of white cardstock and another butterfly out of craft cardstock. I'm just using my fine nozzle adhesive here, liquid adhesive, and I'm going to glue it down on a piece of vellum. I'm just going to glue it down here. I'm going to cut this out in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and glue both of them down first. Now, there's another way to do this. I don't know what. I was just feeling a little lazy, I guess, or something. I just did not want to trace. You can trace your butterflies first and cut and then glue, but for some reason I decided to do it this way. It seemed easier. It would have been fine if I didn't glue the antennas down, so I ended up having to kind of cut around the antenna. If I were to trace, I could just trace the butterfly, not even bother tracing around the antenna. And so basically when I cut the vellum out, I won't even have little vellum antennas to even worry about. But anyways, it worked fine. This worked fine. Maybe just a little bit more of a hassle. So all I'm doing here is just cutting around the butterfly, the white die cut. I'm angling my scissors a little bit so the blade of the scissors is actually under the white die cut. So I'm not cutting the die cut at all. I'm not cutting that white butterfly at all. I'm actually cutting right underneath it. I have my scissors angled in such a way that I'm cutting the vellum under that lip of the edge of the cardstock butterfly. So it's actually very easy to do, but it would have been really, really easy to do if I didn't make the mistake of gluing my antenna down to the vellum. But oh well, it worked. And I'm going to do the exact same thing now to the craft butterfly. I'm just going to cut this one out as well. So what we're going to move on to next is finishing these additions, these butterfly additions. But I'm making one obviously for the white card and one for the craft card. And because the craft card or the white cardstock butterfly, the butterflies that are stamped on the white cardstock, they're much more intense. The ink is much more intense, or at least you can see the images, I should say. That's a better way to say it. The images that I stamped on that white cardstock, the butterflies that I stamped, are much brighter because they're not competing with the cardstock at all like they are with the craft. So I'm going to have to make my embellishment, my butterfly, my vellum butterfly, I'm going to have to make that one a little bit differently than my craft vellum butterfly. So right now they're starting off the same, but I'm going to diverge. So that's an important thing here to note, that I'm going to diverge that. So even though I start with these vellum butterfly accents at the same, they're going to diverge from now on. So right now I have 2 more of these craft butterflies cut out, and I'm going to stack them on top of each other. So I'm just going to put that adhesive on the back, and I'm going to stack it on top of the vellum. So I'm going directly on the top of the butterfly that I just glued down to the vellum. So I'm not going behind or anything, directly on top. So I've got 2 now stacked up on top of each other with a vellum at the very bottom. And now I'm going to glue 1 more butterfly on top. So again, it will be 3 craft butterflies and then the vellum at the very bottom. And I will be doing the white butterfly a little bit different. Okay, so just going to line this up. When you're lining these up, well, liquid adhesive is a must. You must have you need that little bit of give that liquid adhesive allows. And then you just use your fingers to kind of go around the edges, squeeze around the edges, and that will line up those 2 die cuts. It's very, very easy to do if you haven't done it before. Okay, so now with the white, I'm going to take these 2 white die cuts, and you see printing and color there. That's because I'm using some scrap paper. I'm going to line them one on top of the other. Stack them up here, line them up, using my fingers, like I said before, kind of squeezing the edges to kind of make sure everything's lined up. And then I'm going to take these 2 stacked up dies, and then I'm going to glue them, well, I should say I'm going to glue this vellum butterfly on top of them. So this is different. The craft, I glued the 2 more die cuts on top of the vellum. This time I'm taking the vellum butterfly and I'm putting it on top of the stacked. So a little bit different. The reason why I'm doing it differently is because the white cardstock, or the white panel that I stamped, those colorful butterflies are much more vivid and much more intense. And if I have my vellum raised up off the surface a little bit higher, so I've got those 2 layers of cardstock that are raising that vellum up off the surface, it makes the vellum kind of darker or more opaque, less transparent, and and it'll make it stand out more from the background. So that's why I'm doing that. I don't have to worry about that though with the craft one, so that's just something to think about with vellum, is if you raise it up off the surface, it becomes more opaque. You have a harder time seeing the images behind it. And then to finish it off, I grabbed 1 more die cut of the butterfly and I put it on top. And that's just to give a little bit more dimension and depth to that top when you look down at the top, because I like that thickness. So there, my 2 butterfly accents are done. And yes, that white one's a little bit thicker because it does have 4 white die cuts and the craft has only 3. Okay, so now it's time to construct the cards. We got everything finished here. So my panels are all dry. See how nice and intense those butterflies look on that craft cardstock? Distress Oxides are seriously so cool. And then the little bit of variation with the butterflies there, but I really like the, it's not a perfectly solid image, but it's very, you can tell exactly what it is, and you just have a little bit of play with the ink because of the water and the 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation stamping that we did. So I'm just using some liquid adhesive, and I'm going to adhere this panel down on a top folding A2 card base. Just going to press it down here. I'm really liking adhering my panels down with liquid adhesive right now. I just, for one thing, it's cheaper than the craft tape, but also it gives me that little bit of give that I can kind of tweak the angle, so I don't have to worry so much about getting my panel perfectly straight like the first time I lay it down. So I'm really liking using this Tombow mono multi liquid adhesive. It's awesome. It's so strong. It works perfect for this. So I'm really liking doing that with my panels right now. Okay, so now I'm going to take that craft butterfly accent and I'm going to adhere that to the upper portion of my card. I started with the mono adhesive, but I really needed a fine nozzle, so I switched back to my fine nozzle adhesive. Just squeezing all around here, and I just picked up that nozzle. You can get it I got it on Amazon, but you can get it at lots of places. And adhere that down. And I'm just using my acrylic block to kind of hold it while it dries. And I'm going to take the white one, and again using that fine nozzle with the adhesive inside and just dotting the back, and then I'll adhere this down. And then I'll move on to my sentiments. So I stamped and embossed already. It's Your Day it's embossed in white on the craft cardstock. And then I took a little bit of mint cardstock and stamped with the worn lipstick. It's Your Day on that. And now I'm just adding some craft foam for some dimension. And then I'll adhere this underneath the butterfly accents. And I stopped right here, and I'm sorry for this being kind of hodgepodgey, but I kind of it dawned on me, maybe I should show you the vellum thing that I was talking about. So once I get this foam tape down, I'm going to show you kind of what I was talking about with the vellum. So I'm going to grab a little scrap of vellum here just so you can see how when you hold it up close, it's much more transparent. You can see through it a lot more, but when you hold it away from it's harder to see. It's more opaque. So that's the whole reasoning why I stacked up 2 die cuts behind the vellum layer of the butterfly. Okay, so now I'm just going to peel the backing off and add my sentiment and line it up here, straighten it out, and these cards will be done. So pretty simple. Really, but very cool that you can make your own stamps with the with craft foam, which is really, really inexpensive, and it really stretches your dies. So check out your dies, especially your intricate dies. They were great for this technique. And again, those craft foam stamps or DIY stamps work really well with these Distress Oxides too. So that's a really fun thing to try to play with those Distress Oxides and maybe make some of your DIY stamps. So all finished here. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video, and if you want any more info on the products that I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day.